As Christmas draws closer, whether it's on the battlefield or inside their homes, Ukrainians are facing relentless Russian strikes, heavy attacks plunging cities into darkness, damaged rail lines, and also the battlefield turning even more volatile. And along the front lines, the situation remains explosive. A rapid cycle of attacks and counterattacks continues across multiple sectors. Russian forces saying they struck 154 Ukrainian targets in the past 24 hours itself, while Ukraine's military reporting 151 combat engagements along the front, pointing to intense fighting with no let-up. And these visuals from southern Ukraine's Zaporizhia region. Russian forces carried out near-simultaneous strikes, setting large areas on fire, explosions and fires, marking a battlefield that remains firmly on edge as both sides fight for control. The Ukrainian authorities, in fact, claiming that at least 19 people were injured after the Russian airstrikes hit Zaporizhia. Kiev claiming the strike damaged residential buildings and an educational facility. Meanwhile, in Kiev, Christmas lights glowing, but the celebrations are muted. Russian strikes on Ukraine's energy grid have forced widespread power cuts. Residents reportedly now facing electricity outages lasting up to 16 hours a day. Businesses running largely on generators just to keep the doors open. Residents in Odessa remained without power for a majority of this week after missile and drone attacks crippled the grid. Many homes still without power, deepening the hardship on the ground. Odessa residents queuing up for water, filling up bottles from the emergency tanks placed across the city there. The attacks have disrupted daily life, to say the least. Basic services during the coldest period of the year also impacted. Ukrainian officials also claiming that trams were halted for a sixth consecutive day after Russian strikes crippled the power grid. Kiev claims Russian drone and missile strikes on energy infrastructure intensified in October and have since triggered major power shortages nationwide. Ukrainian officials reportedly warning that the attacks threaten transmission systems that move electricity from western Ukraine to the east, raising fears that the country's grid could effectively split into two. Ukraine's deputy energy minister saying Russia launched nearly 5,000 drones and missiles in November, more than double the number seen early this year, and he claims that it targeted power plants, transmission grids, gas facilities, key regional hubs. The railways also under fire. In the last 6 months itself, attacks on Ukraine's rail network reportedly tripled, with more than 600 strikes reported since the month of July, disrupting transport and logistics. Not just for the military, but also for Ukrainian citizens, of course. On the diplomatic front, meanwhile, the hope for a Christmas ceasefire remains slim. The Ukrainian president has said on Monday itself that Kiev supported the idea of a ceasefire, especially on potential strikes on energy infrastructure. During the Christmas period, the Kremlin has made it clear that any truce depends on a comprehensive and lasting peace deal, while the Russian president has warned that Russia will liberate its land by military means if Ukraine and allies ditch dialogue.
The
goals of the special military operation will undoubtedly be achieved. We would prefer to do this and address the root causes of the conflict through diplomacy. If the opposing side and their foreign patrons refuse to engage in substantive discussions, Russia will achieve the liberation of its historical lands by military means.
Switching gears for now, the Pakistan Army Chief Asim Munir wants mercenary dollar raids for his troops in Gaza. That's right, Pakistan's most powerful military chief in decades, facing the toughest test of his newly amassed powers as Washington pushes Islamabad to contribute troops to the Gaza stabilization force. And according to Reuters, Pakistan Field Marshal Asim Munir is expected to fly to Washington to meet Donald Trump in the coming weeks for a third meeting in 6 months that will likely focus on the Gaza force. Trump's 20-point Gaza plan, remember, calls for a force from Muslim nations to basically oversee a transition period for reconstruction and economic recovery in the war-torn Palestinian territory decimated by over 2 years of the Israeli military bombardment. Many countries are wary of the mission to demilitarize Gaza's Islamist group, Hamas, which could drag them into the conflict and enrage their pro-Palestinian and anti-Israeli populations. But Munir has built a close relationship with President Trump, it seems, to repair years of mistrust between Washington and Islamabad. Remember, in the month of June this year, he was rewarded with a White House lunch. That was the first time a U.S. president hosted Pakistan's army chief alone, without civilian officials, basically. And last month itself, the Pakistani foreign minister said that Islamabad could consider contributing troops for peacekeeping, but disarming Hamas is not our job, quote unquote. That's what he said. All of this coming amid Asim Munir's unprecedented rise in Pakistan. We've been telling you about this. Just days ago, he was anointed the chief of the defense forces to head the Air Force and the Navy with a job extension until 2030. He will be retaining his Field Marshal title forever, as well as enjoy lifetime immunity from any criminal prosecution under the constitutional amendments that Pakistan's civilian government pushed through the parliament late last month. So a lot has been happening on that front. And analysts are saying that only a handful of people in Pakistan actually enjoy the luxury of being able to take the risks more than Asim Munir. He does have that kind of power, which is now constitutionally protected. And it must be noted here that over the past few weeks, Asim Munir has met military and civilian leaders from countries like Indonesia, Malaysia, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Jordan, Egypt, Qatar, which some analysts say appear to be consultations on the Gaza force. But Asim Munir's plans may face protests even at home. Analysts are saying that the involvement of Pakistan troops in Gaza under a US-backed plan could reignite protests from Pakistan's Islamist parties, parties that are deeply opposed to the US and Israel. In fact, the Islamists have street power to mobilize thousands, and which is why this is significant as well. We've seen what Islamabad does when that happens. A powerful and violent anti-Israel Islamist party that fights for upholding Pakistan's ultra-strict blasphemy laws was banned in October. Authorities arrested its leaders and over 1,500 supporters and seized its assets and bank accounts in the ongoing crackdown. While Islamabad has outlawed the group, its ideology is still alive. And let's not forget here the party of former jailed Prime Minister Imran Khan, whose supporters won the most seats in the 2024 national elections and has wide public support, also has an axe to grind against Asim Munir, to say the least. And if things escalated once the Gaza force was on the ground, it would cause problems rather quickly. People will say Asim Munir is doing Israel's bidding, in a way. President Donald Trump has ordered a blockade of sanctioned oil tankers entering and leaving Venezuela, dramatically escalating pressure on President Nicolas Maduro. As the United States builds up its military presence in the region, Trump announced the move on social media, claiming that Venezuela is now surrounded by what he called the largest armada ever assembled in the history of South America. Now, he warned that the build-up would only grow and that the shock to Caracas would be unprecedented. The move threatens to choke off the economic lifeline of an already struggling nation. Oil, remember, is Venezuela's primary source of hard currency, and targeting tanker traffic strikes directly at the heart of the economy. However, the global market impact is expected to be limited. Venezuela's oil industry has been hollowed out over decades of mismanagement and also the sanctions. Crude output has fallen roughly 70% over the past 25 years to under 1 million barrels a day. Even so, the markets reacted. U.S. crude prices rose at as much as 1.7%, rebounding from near 5-year lows. Caracas has condemned the blockade, meanwhile, as reckless and illegal. In a statement, the Maduro government accused Washington of attempting to steal Venezuela's natural resources and said that it would immediately raise the issue at the United Nations, calling it a grave violation of international law. Trump went further, though, formally designating the Maduro regime as a foreign terrorist organization. He accused the government of using oil revenue to finance drug trafficking, human trafficking, murder and kidnapping. By targeting oil, basically, Trump is hitting Venezuela where it hurts the most. The government's access to dollars is almost entirely dependent on crude exports. Remember, U.S. restrictions imposed earlier this year have already pushed the country towards the brink of hyperinflation. Last week itself, U.S. authorities seized a sanctioned oil tanker off Venezuela's coast. And in the days that followed, multiple supertankers reversed course, a clear sign that the pressure campaign is having an immediate effect. The Pentagon also stepped up operations in nearby waters, carrying out more than 20 strikes against vessels accused of drug trafficking near Venezuela and Colombia. Trump has repeatedly suggested military action remains an option and that Maduro should be removed from power. And analysts are warning that this campaign is still in its early stages, with the likelihood of further escalation growing as time passes by. And for Venezuela, already economically crippled and politically isolated, the blockade marks a dangerous new phase in its standoff with the United States. To stay up to speed with the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.